Just imagine. You're locked in a prison surrounded by nothing but ice, where escaping means certain death. But there was one man who dared to defy this fate and fought for 7 long years just to stay alive. Let's see the story of this man. The story begins in the freezing, terrifying prisons of Siberia, where dozens of German soldiers were lined up. After World War II ended, Russia captured many German soldiers and forced them to work day and night in coal mines. Now, imagine a place where there's only snow everywhere, no people, no roads, and temperatures so low that even breathing is hard. That's why, even though the prison's security was minimal, no one ever dared to escape. Because even if someone did, death by cold was guaranteed. But there was one prisoner who was different. His name was Clemens Forell, a man of sharp mind, unbreakable will, and above all, a man who just wanted to see his wife and daughter again. Clemens had been sentenced to 25 years in that icy prison, but he knew that if he stayed, half his life would be lost in that frozen hell, and he refused to let that happen. Days passed as Clemens waited for the right moment to escape. Then one day, fate gave him a chance. A coal train was just leaving the prison. Clemens seized the moment and slipped inside. After hours of travel, for the first time he saw the open sky beyond the prison walls. The stars were shining, and he felt alive again. But fate had other plans. The train soon stopped, and a Russian guard, gun in hand, stood before him. Clemens was caught again. This time the punishment was so cruel it could freeze one's soul. He was stripped naked and left in the snow for 2 days under the open sky. Clemens was barely breathing by the end. 2 days later, the warden came to him and said, "Come on, your friends are waiting." Clemens thought maybe they cared for him. But as soon as he entered the barracks, the other prisoners attacked him. Because of his escape attempt, they had been left starving for 2 days. Clemens lost consciousness and was taken to the hospital, where he met a German doctor, also a prisoner. When Clemens awoke, he said, "I'm going to escape again, no matter what it takes." The doctor was shocked, then said, "Escaping from here is calling death upon yourself. But if you stay, you'll die anyway. The air from the coal mines is poisonous. It causes cancer." Then the doctor handed Clemens all his warm clothes, boots, a gun, and some supplies. He said he too once planned to escape, but had recently learned he had cancer, only weeks left to live. He gave Clemens a lunchbox and said, "If you make it out alive, please give this to my family. Tell them I'm gone." That night, Clemens escaped again, this time on foot. Fighting the biting wind, he kept walking. By morning, when the warden learned of the escape, he rushed to the doctor. But the doctor had already taken his own life. Hundreds of soldiers were sent to search for Clemens, but the snowfall had wiped out his tracks. Everyone thought he must have frozen to death. Everyone, except the warden. "He's alive," the warden said, "because he's Clemens." Meanwhile, Clemens had been walking for 9 days, battling hunger and exhaustion. He hallucinated, dreaming of food, warmth, and people, but waking up to endless snow. He had nothing left to eat, until one day he spotted a seal. His eyes lit up. He aimed his gun, but missed, too weak. The seal fled. Desperate, Clemens chased it. The ice cracked, and he fell into freezing water, injuring his leg. Yet he refused to give up. He fired again, this time hitting the seal. For the first time in days, he had food. He lit a fire, ate, and whispered to himself, "You can do it, Clemens." Just a little more. Days passed. Nights grew longer. After 2 months, he finally saw a tree in the distance. The first sign the icy wasteland was ending. He ran and hugged it, crying with relief. Beyond that point lay a forest. He lit another fire, and for the first time in months, slept peacefully. But peace never lasted for him. The next day, a massive storm struck. A tree fell on him. Luckily, 2 gold prospectors passing by saw him and saved his life. The 3 then traveled together for days, until they reached the edge of the frozen plains. They built a wooden raft to cross a river, but as they crossed, one man fell into the freezing current. Clemens jumped in after him and dragged him to shore, saving his life. The third man, however, ran off with their gold. When they returned and saw the betrayal, Clemens's companion shot the traitor dead. Now only 2 men remained, Clemens and the survivor. But food was scarce and the cold brutal. When Clemens offered to carry his companion's load, the man grew suspicious, thinking Clemens wanted his gold. In anger, he pushed Clemens, who fell and lost consciousness. When he awoke, wolves were circling him. He tried to climb a tree, but one wolf grabbed his leg. The tree snapped, and Clemens fell. Just when it seemed over, gunshots rang out. Local hunters had killed the wolves and saved him. They took Clemens to their village and treated him for weeks. He slowly recovered. After years, he finally saw human kindness again. But fate tested him once more. One day, a message arrived from the same warden, warning villagers that anyone sheltering an escaped prisoner would be executed. Clemens knew he couldn't stay. Before leaving, the villagers gave him food and a hunting dog as a companion. Together, they set out again. Days later, they reached a sawmill. The dog wandered in for food, and Clemens followed. Workers recognized him and took him to the mill's owner. The owner, moved by Clemens's story, fed him and put him on a train heading toward Germany. Clemens finally thought it was over, that he was going home. But the mill owner had secretly informed the warden. As the train neared the station, Clemens saw Russian soldiers waiting. He knew it was a trap. He jumped off the train and ran. The warden and his men chased him. Clemens ran with all his strength, until the warden stood before him, gun aimed. Suddenly, Clemens's dog leapt at the warden, biting him. Clemens got another chance. He ran, but a shot rang out. When he turned, his dog was lying still on the ground. Tears filled his eyes, but he couldn't stop. He climbed onto a bridge and leapt onto a passing train, escaping death once again. Months turned into years. By 1952, 7 years had passed since his escape. Clemens arrived at a small fair in Central Asia, people laughing, children playing. It felt like another world. He was starving. 2 girls were selling pancakes. He wanted one, but had no money. He quietly walked away, but one girl noticed him, smiled kindly, and handed him a piece. He thanked her and began eating. A man nearby watched him and asked, "You're not an escaped prisoner, are you?" Clemens froze, but the man smiled and said, "Don't worry. I was a prisoner once too." He took Clemens home, gave him food, a bath, clean clothes, and even a shave. "Now," he said, "you should go home." He arranged a fake passport for Clemens, and weeks later, Clemens finally reached the Russia-Germany border. A Russian guard stood there. Clemens handed him his passport with trembling hands. The guard looked at him, paused, and then silently waved him through. Tears rolled down Clemens's face as he stepped onto the bridge. Just a few steps more, and he'd be home. But then, a bright light shone on him. He turned, and there stood the warden. Clemens's heart pounded. If he was caught now, 7 years of struggle would be for nothing. The 2 locked eyes. A long silence followed. Then the warden said quietly, "This war was between 2 soldiers, you and me. And you've won." Clemens couldn't tell if it was real or a dream. The warden slowly nodded and stepped aside. Clemens walked forward, crossed the